Welcome to the Coordinated Entry Site Visit Audit Documentation and Procedure Training, presented by the Westchester Continuum of Care Partnership to End Homelessness on December 7th, 2020.
And we do ask that you bear with us. We're still kind of getting used to the remote training, so hopefully there won't be any technical difficulties, but we thank you guys in advance for your patience and your assistance and cooperation with this process. This training is a walkthrough of everything you need to be prepared for the coordinated entry site visit or desk audit. It should not be a surprise to a CE administrator that these documents are required and expected. And again, we're giving you all the answers, everything you need to know for when we come, and we'll take your questions as we go on. This is a cheat sheet to a perfect audit. We will cover the HMIS release of information, the coordinated entry receipt. Again, that is repetitious. We've gone over it before, but we want to give you some additional information where this information needs to be stored as far as your record is concerned, as far as uploaded into HMIS. We'll go through details. We will also talk about the 24-hour coordinated entry requirements, how to run a report to identify clients who need coordinated entry enrollment. And this is new, using the case notes to document activities. With HUD requirements, HUD needs to see certain documentation. HUD needs to see proof that you guys are doing the good work that you're doing. So we'll talk about that as we go through the training. Also, why, when, and how clients need the chat. We'll be talking about the chat. We will not be going in depth about how to do the chat. That's going to be for a later training. But we're going to talk about the basics of the chat in this training. Homeless status verification, documentation that's needed, and how you guys go about verifying that information. How to get the number of months homeless correct. This has been an ongoing issue for many of you guys, and so we want to go through that in depth and give you the tools and information that's necessary to make sure that is documented correctly. All right. So without any further ado, we'll go through the coordinated entry release and the coordinated entry receipt. The HMIS release of information is one of two very important documentation that needs to be uploaded into HMIS, or the Homeless Management Information System, as well as our coordinated entry receipt. By signing this form, the client agrees to share their personal information for the purpose of housing by entering their information into HMIS. This form must be uploaded into HMIS for every client, and a copy must be placed in their paper record. Clients can decline to sign the consent, but must be informed that by doing so, they're declining various housing opportunities and resources. This is an example of the HMIS client release of information. Your agency's name should go at the top, and at the bottom of the form is a place for the clients to print their name, signature, as well as your agency's representative. Below is additional information for other household members that can be printed and documented on this form. The coordinated entry receipt. The receipt is required whenever a client is entered into coordinated entry. The client must sign the receipt to demonstrate that they are aware of how the coordinated entry system works. The client must be given a copy of the receipt, and the receipt must be uploaded into HMIS, as well as a copy must be placed in the paper record. This is an example of the coordinated entry receipt. Please note that this is different from the previous coordinated entry receipt that we used in the past, because it now has a place for the client's name, as well as a place for the client to sign when they've been, once this form has been discussed with them. These documents can be found on our COC website.
This is the part of our presentation that is new. So this is documenting housing related client activity using HMIS case notes. So before now, it has always been required that coordinated entry assessors document their efforts to assist clients during the housing process. So when a coordinated entry or referral for a client comes through, a conversation must begin with the housing provider and the client to assist the client with the transition to permanent housing. There must be subsequent follow-up to the initial contact until the client is housed, and documentation of all housing-related activities must continue until the client is housed. This can be done using the case notes and HMIS to keep everything related to the client in one place. This is the part that's new. Daniel Gore, our HMIS administrator, has updated the case notes to make this easier for you to keep track of. You can take these notes in other formats and upload them to HMIS, or you can do this in HMIS and then download it and put a copy in the client's paper file so you have it during the site visit or the audit. What you're really looking to do when you make these notes is answer the question, how did you work with the client and the housing provider to transition the clients referred to coordinated entry to housing?
To record a case note, simply go to your client's menu, click on Case Notes, click Add New, and fill out the information. There's an option here to record a note type called Housing Engagement to help us clearly categorize these efforts. You can tie this to the coordinated entry enrollment. Enter a subject line for this activity. And down below, you can describe exactly what occurred. Down below, there are options here to make this a read-only note so that only it can only be edited by your organization. Additionally, there's a restriction here to restrict it to just your organization. For coordinated entry purposes, you probably don't want to do that so that DSS and others working with the client can see that note, but you can discuss that internally with your agency administrator. Click Save, and that case note is now saved. You can always go here to view it or edit it, as well as select those you wish to print.
Next, we're going to talk about the chat. So this is where we promise to tell you the why, when, and how about the chat. So this is not a full chat training. This is telling you why you're doing the chat, when you're doing the chat, and pointing you to where you're doing the chat so that you can find out how to do the chat.
We're going to be doing a separate chat training that takes you through every single question and gives you advice on how to answer and make sure that you are getting the correct and best information on behalf of the client. So why we do the chat? Every coordinated entry client needs a completed, comprehensive homelessness assessment tool, a chat, to be added to prioritization for housing. If they don't have a chat, they won't appear on the prioritization list, and everything you did to enroll them in coordinated entry won't get them any closer to housing. So along with the amount of time the client has been homeless, the chat score determines their prioritization for housing openings. When do you want to do a chat? You want to do it when you enroll them in coordinated entry, and you need to update it once per year. The only exception to that guideline is when the clients experience changes in a way that would impact their score. They need a new chat immediately, and I'll give you some examples in these situations. The client becomes employed, or the client becomes unemployed, the client becomes disabled, or the client is hospitalized or incarcerated. All of these status changes will impact their score.
To see if clients in your facility don't have a chat, simply navigate to the housing screen, select the facility you want to investigate, then click on Current Residents. Since only head of households receive a chat, use the filter to only show your heads of household. Now we have two results. Next, click on the option that says No Chat, and this will show you which clients do not have a chat. In this case, we have one client who is active in coordinated entry but does not have that chat score. You can then select a client, which will take you over to the client screen, where you can then simply click on the coordinated entry enrollment to add a chat.
Verification of homelessness. Well, you might ask, why is this necessary? It's clear that the customer is in a shelter. However, HUD requires documentation. So on the day of the coordinated entry enrollment, homelessness must be documented in the client file. That can be done using either a signed letter from the ES staff indicating client slept at the shelter the night before enrollment, which we'll demonstrate in a second, or HMIS check-in screen printed out showing the check-in starting the night before enrollment. The signed letter must be uploaded to HMIS and placed in the client's paper record. Alternatively, if using the HMIS record, the check-in record must be printed and placed in the client's paper record. We'll now demonstrate the verification letter that any agency can type up and print out, placed in the record, and also uploaded into HMIS. As you can see, it's a basic letter with the shelter provider's name and address, homeless verification, the date, and also the client's name, and indicating the date or the night the customer slept in the shelter. Thank you.
to the date of their arrival, which we see here there are none. Additionally, you can check to view any documentation, either self-certification, letters from outreach outside of the county, or shelters from outside the county to attest to their homelessness. Once you've reviewed and verified that information and complete the next set of questions, the system will give you a clear indicator here of how many months homeless have been auto-calculated based on what shelter stays and outreach contexts are here in the Westchester HMIS within the past 3 years. For this client, this is our starting point, 0. There were no prior months homeless prior to this first month, at least based on what was auto-calculated. Again, if you have additional documentation, that would allow you to increase this to 2, 3, 4, or more months. Just make sure that you have that here uploaded in documentation. Additionally, if you need to do this outside of that initial coordinated entry enrollment, you can always go here to your client menu, click on Documents, and upload that information. However, if any documents do change the client's number of months based on what you had originally entered, you would want to review that entry assessment and make the change under HMIS Universal Data. However, the easiest way to reach that screen is simply to click on Edit Coordinated Entry, and this will guide you through those initial steps you have completed until you reach the Universal Data Assessment.
All right, are there any questions on anything that's been discussed so far? Any questions? I didn't see any questions pop up in the chat, but are there any questions at all? Okay. Well, we thank you guys for your participation. Of course, you can see here, this is your COC admin team. Jo Marie Tashun is our coordinated entry administrator. She's the one that makes the referrals, and you guys hear from her probably quite a bit. Myself, Craig Wong, Allison McSpadden, Westchester County COC chairs, Carl Bertram, Annette Peters Ravolo, co-chair, of course, Yoav and Treese, and of course, Daniel Gore, our HMIS administrator. This recording will be posted on the COC website for you guys to review and to refer back to in months to come. Yoav or Allison, did you guys have anything, or Daniel, anything to say before I guess we close up, unless there are any other questions?
We do have questions that are coming in now.
Okay, good.
So we were asked, is the HMIS release of information new? And the answer to that is no. The clients have always had the HMIS release of information. However, now it's part of the coordinated entry process because the client is, giving informed consent of how their data is going to be used to let them access housing resources at that time. It's really important. This is something that's come up a couple of times in the past couple of weeks. We have a lot of clients who have serious mental illness. That includes paranoia. If there is a release of information already entered into HMIS, it's uploaded and you can see it, please don't repeatedly ask. This goes for all documentation. If a client just needs to have something in the system one time, please don't repeatedly ask them for the same information over and over again. This is really affecting our clients who experience conditions that include paranoia, and has gotten worse during COVID because everyone's kind of got a heightened, preoccupation with there being a threat. So I just wanted to make that really clear, that's part of the initial onboarding process.
And just to add to the release, and important thing again, just to stress about the release is that it needs to be uploaded into HMIS, and a copy needs to be placed in the record in order for us to have access to that documentation when we do our site visits.
Yes, this should be in every client's hard copy folder and uploaded to every client's HMIS dashboard. We have another question. When you enter the number of months homeless, is that starting from when they enter your residence or shelter episodes? That is starting from the first day that they became homeless.
And I can chime in. So there are a couple dates there. One, when did the homelessness start? That's that approximate date homelessness started. And that's not necessarily referring to your shelter, but just to the current episode, which could have involved their couch surfing before, their stays at another shelter or on the street before. So approximate that date based on what information is available. But the more important date for coordinated entry purposes and prioritization is the number of months homeless. And so that's looking across the past 3 years at their cumulative number of months homeless. And that red number is what the system can tell you, just based on what information we have. So that's a starting point, and you can increase that and enter a higher number if you have documentation. So if we see in Westchester that someone has 3 months of homelessness in the past 3 years, you'll want to enter that unless there's some self-certification that you can get signed and uploaded to HMIS, or a letter from another shelter, maybe from outside the county. So hopefully that answers your question, Stephanie.
And if I could, I'll add the date, everything is from the point of view in the coordinated entry enrollment of the day you were enrolling them in coordinated entry. So it is the number of months homeless in the last 36 months from the day you enroll them in coordinated entry. And the time since last homelessness, the length of the current episode is the current episode on the day that you enroll them in coordinated entry. It's not when they first came to your shelter, but it's the day you enroll them in coordinated entry. Everything that Danielle and Allison said.
And can you talk a bit about the rules around how self-certification works, how much time that can cover?
Sure. Self-certification can only be used to add up to 3 months to the number of months homelessness that are counted for the purposes of coordinated entry. So if someone has been in your shelter for 6 months and before that were living on the streets for 8 months, and you document that and upload some certification, a self-certification that they were living on the street for 8 months, you still only will enter 6 months in your shelter plus 3 self-certified, because the maximum number of months that can be self-certified is 3. If street homelessness is certified by some third party, a street outreach worker, a police officer, a store owner who saw them in their parking lot, that can be certified for an unlimited number of months. So if the person was living on the streets for 8 months and a police officer says that they saw them in each month at least once, 8 times, then you can add 6 plus 8 to get to 14 months homeless for that person to get their true homelessness. But if all you have is a self-certification for that street homelessness, you can go to a maximum of 3 added to the shelter stays in the system.
Thank you. Those are very good questions. Any other questions? All right. Are there any other additional comments that you guys would like to give before we, I guess we'll close?
Oh, here's another question.
Oh, good.
What about if a client moves into permanent housing and then comes back within a short time? So yeah, go ahead.
That shouldn't affect, I mean, that's built into the discussion that we're having, that when we count number of months homeless, we count all time spent in emergency shelter or the streets over the last 36 months. The other months may be time spent permanently housed. That could be a HUD program, or it could be living with their sister, or it could be in rapid rehousing. We only count the months that they were in emergency shelter in the streets over the last 36 and enter that number. The intervening time, the non-homeless time, doesn't matter what it was, if it was transitional housing or permanent, a halfway house, or inpatient stay, none of that matters. We only count, and it doesn't affect the number, if that's the question. That may or may not, depending on what the permanent housing affect eligibility for specific housing referrals, but that isn't your problem. When you're deciding on the number of months homeless, you only count shelter and stays and living on the streets, and it doesn't matter what the intervening episodes are.
Another good question. Are there any other questions?
Does everybody feel ready after watching this to just have a perfect audit where you have everything you need and you're ready to go? If the answer is no, you don't have to answer now, but I would strongly encourage you to touch base with Craig and Yoav. They're not there to test you. It's not a test of what you know. You can ask them right up until the minute of the audit, what is it that I am supposed to be doing on this particular thing? And they will tell you, because we all want you to succeed. We want to have all top-notch audits that reflect the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Allison. Sure, we certainly want to give you guys all the answers for the test, so to speak. So please feel free to reach out to us with any additional questions. Again, this information will be posted on the website for you guys to review. We know that there's staff that are new and there's staff that are experienced. So again, please feel free to refer back to this information as necessary and reach out to us with any questions. We will be sending you guys a survey about today's training. Please give us your feedback. It's very important to us, whether it's positive, negative, what you liked, what you didn't like. It helps us to develop a better process of training and giving the information that you guys feel is relevant. So please get back to us when you guys receive the information for the survey, because we want to continue to do these kinds of trainings to give you the support that's necessary to continue to do the good work that you guys are doing. So, did any other questions pop up? seems like every time I try to wrap up, questions pop up,
That's the way of the world.
which is fine, which is fine. We're open to all questions. But if not, if you have anything else you think of later, please shoot us an email. We will respond and get back to you as quickly as we can. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you all for your hard work, as Daniel just said, and your time and your participation is greatly appreciated. Thank you all. Have a great day.